All right. Well, hello everyone on the Hangout, and welcome to the first in our week-long series from the Creative Sandbox Gallery. My name is Brian. I'm here at Google, and sitting next to me is Pete.
Hey, I'm Pete LePage. I'm a developer advocate on the Chrome team, and I help developers make cool web stuff.
So that's what we're going to talk about today. And today we're going to be talking about mobile specifically. And this whole week we're going to be highlighting agencies that have done spectacular creative work using some of Google's products or APIs. This afternoon we have Beattie McGuinness Bungay on the line, and they are all in London, so it's very dark out by them, and we appreciate them coming on board this late in the afternoon. Thanks, guys. If you guys could give a quick round of who you are and what you do at the agency, then we'll segue into what you've done, and we'll take a look at some of your work.
Hello, I'm Arthur, and I was the creative tech on the project.
I'm Max. I was the account director at B&B on Grolsch.
My name is Mel, and I'm the producer on Grolsch.
And my name is Carl, and I was the interactive designer on the project.
All right,
cool.
So there we are. And before we segue in, we're going to talk to these guys about what they did, how they did it, who they worked with, what were the horrible nightmares they dealt with, what were the wonderful rainbows that appeared on the horizon. Let's actually take a look at a reel of the work, and we'll jump in after that.
Awesome.
Grolsch is a big, bold beer looking to deliver a rich brand experience.
Jant van Dijk. This legendary policeman has never spoken a word. Local gangs have dubbed him Diristika Das, the Quiet Badger. Sing, little canary, sing. Character speaks louder than words. Big, bold Grolsch.
Our TV campaign was just the beginning. We invited our intrigued audience to meet Jant, our big, bold character online.
So, you've found Jant, the Netherlands' most notorious police officer. The man who never speaks, hears everything. Text him your name, and if it sounds familiar, he'll buy you a beer.
Jant receives everyone's text live in the video, replying in real time. Mobile technology allows us to bring our online Jant to life, and every user has a unique experience. Over 2,000 users a day are texting to see if Jant's heard of them. If Jant has heard of them, they receive a voucher for a free 4-pack of Grolsch. And to make it even easier, we'll give directions to the closest place to redeem the voucher. Win or lose, people are sharing their experience and bringing a whole new audience to Grolsch. Try it for yourself at grolsch.co.uk.
Awesome. Well, I thought that was a pretty cool sort of highlight covering a lot of neat stuff.
Yeah, very, very cool. It looks like it was a very fun client for you guys. I hope so. And that was a really, really great use of a lot of different technologies. So maybe we can kick off and just go around the table. And I'm going to ask the first question, and this is something that we think about a lot here, is what led to the idea generation process? Were you guys thinking about like Maps technology and the technology you wanted to harness, and then build a campaign around that? Or did you have a campaign idea and then go seeking technology that would fit in there? Like, what was the process for all of you?
Well, I think for us it was very much, actually the campaign came first and the technology kind of fitted into that. So Grolsch came to us with a brief that they wanted to really relaunch after being quite quiet for a period. So we kind of came up with a campaign about Big Bold Grolsch, which is because it has a sort of slightly bigger flavour than other beers. So we wanted to really highlight this and hero it. Actually, it's got this big flavour, but it never needs to really speak about it. So we came up with a campaign of silent legends, who are characters who kind of reach the top of their game without having to ever say a word. So with the creative team, we came up with sort of a TV campaign which went out in the UK, And then from that, we wanted to then get an experience that actually got the brand into people's hands. So how could we take these big silent characters and big bold Grolsch and actually give people an experience that then ended up with them getting a beer, which was then when we brought the guys in.
I think we worked with Kate Baker and Joe Bruce, and they were the creators on this, and they had a really sort of strong lead in what they wanted to achieve. But we worked with them right from the beginning all the way through to the end. And I think that's what really helped us. It kind of they led the creative route, these silent led where they wanted to go, how they wanted it to work. But since the beginning, they kind of got us involved in how that would filter down from what Max is saying, which is this brand-to-hand experience, which was quite a tall order at the time. It felt like quite a lot to achieve, but you know, looking back on it, it seemed to work quite nicely. The TV kind of led it, that led on to the interactive then led to mobile, and then mobile led to the kind of brand-to-hand experience.
Very nice. So very holistic, actually. So this wasn't something where it was, you know, you guys are just working on the kind of walled-off digital piece. This sounds like this really came across all the different media types, and that was part of the idea from the start. Is that accurate?
Definitely. And I think it was massively important that actually the digital part of this and the kind of the experience that people had wasn't just an add-on that came after a few TV ads. We always wanted a kind of experience, and we wanted a really interesting interactive digital bit, and it was absolutely part of the brief from the beginning. But we kind of needed to come up with a campaign and come up with what Grolsch was going to be, and then tailor a digital experience to that.
Okay, so that was baked in from the beginning, which we love to hear, and I know that sometimes that's a challenge depending on the client, depending on the agency, etc. So it's cool to hear that you guys actually had that from the get-go. So actually, following up on that note, given that it was across so many media and it was a fairly rich, fairly complex campaign, who worked on the project? How did you guys form the team within the agency? How did you decide who was going to work on what piece? How did that all come together?
Well, we had an account team who work on Grolsch all the time. So it was myself as account director, business director, and the planner, Jamie Inman, who we took the brief and we've kind of worked on what Grolsch could be with Kate and Joe. So it was that core team that started off the campaign, started off thinking about kind of where we take Grolsch, but we knew very quickly that we wanted Arthur as creative technologist, Cal and Mel to be part of the campaign. So even as we were kind of looking at the TV scripts, and even as we were coming with these characters, we kept them very much involved in it, and we kept them kind of in the loop, and we were like, look, if there's anything that you think is interesting around this, if there are any interesting technical innovations or anything that you think can kind of help with this brand experience, we want to know early, because I think the earlier you get it into a client, the better. And I think for a process like this, it was one that actually we've stayed, I mean, it was probably about a year and a half in the making. Whoa. All in all, from kind of getting the brief to actually getting it out. And I think that the important thing was that core team stuck together throughout, and actually, you know, we worked very closely with the client, who was very good actually, and very good at kind of understanding that it's not always going to be very straightforward, and if you're trying to do something interesting, if you're trying to do something innovative, there's not always going to be an example of it to sort of say, oh well, it'll be like this. So actually it really helped to have the client come in early, get to know that team and get a lot of trust with that team. It kind of meant that actually moving forward, as we came across different hurdles or different things we needed to do, we had the client on board very much from the start. I think that, yeah, so that team evolved and got bigger. I'm sorry.
So I was going to ask, were you guys, as you were working through some of these, were you building prototypes for things that you're like, hey, we don't even know if this is going to work, or we haven't seen this done before? Did you build a prototype to go, okay, here's what we think it's going to look like, so that you'd have something to show the client and say, hey, this is a prototype, what do you think of this? Or were you going for, hey, here's some wireframes and this is what we think it'll look like?
No, so I mean, I think credit to Mel for holding it all together. We didn't do a prototype, and one thing that we do almost always now is do a prototype. I mean, we're working on a project at the moment where it literally looks like it's held together with Baylor twine, and it's kind of, you know, bits of an API here and then another bit of an API here, and then it's, you know, Times New Roman, and it all looks a bit sloppy. But one thing I think we've probably learned from the experience is no matter how rough and ready, that process is so important to get that together. But we didn't on this one. We didn't have a prototype. We had the kind of rough idea of where we were going with it. We had I think it was five different production partners in total, including us. And we were also rebuilding the responsive website for Grolsch at the same time. So it was lots and lots of holding bits and bobs that, from a good scope of work, we knew we were going to slot into place. The prototype would be one thing that we've learned. We could make things easier for us, I think, going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the way we worked in the end, we kind of had to identify the clear roles and responsibilities for all the different partners involved, because as Arthur said, there were so many. In terms of the prototype though, yeah, we did get to a stage where it wasn't probably till about 3 weeks before launch that we actually had a fully working model that we could start to test and pull apart.
That's
tight.
brave.
We were very lucky was that we had quite a trusting client, and having been involved and knowing the team.
Yeah.
And we had a sort of campaign that we knew was a really interesting one, and we just needed to bring that to life. So I think bringing the client in early and then getting trust for the team actually really helped with this, because then we knew in the end we'd be fine and we knew we'd deliver it, but it's just at all the stages along the way there's not always something to see.
Yeah, we knew technically that it was going to work. We'd sort of pre-written how we wanted the API to work. We've got the production partners in the right places. We've done mini prototypes in different areas that we wanted to do. The thing we didn't do is a master prototype for everything, because it was so difficult with all the kind of rich interactive elements of this thing board. And then Mobius' side, which brought in very much the kind of API that we built. Now the API was the bit that we took a lot of sort of scratching our heads and getting that right, and that was the bit that we needed to make sure was rock solid, because we just didn't want any element of, if the trick didn't work, it would all start to this fall to bits.
Right, but it sounds like you guys were actually quite confident of the technology side, and it sounds like you also had the team formed pretty early. So it sounds like you guys had the team ready to go, working with the client for a long period of time, and you guys felt confident internally that we've got this covered, except we want to test a couple of things. But you pretty much knew what you were doing. You didn't have to build prototypes. You didn't have to do a lot of test runs. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's fairly accurate. We were confident in the kind of the scope of work that we'd written, and it was something that continually evolved. So we even used this kind of the basic route to approach the production partners, and when they kind of came back to us with questions, that's then more information that it helped evolve our scope and update, and eventually it kind of evolved into a functional spec because it became so detailed. And that's kind of the main thing that held our project together, was this one document that it listed exactly how everything's going to work.
I think I've got to say I found it quite hard working with sort of so many production partners, because actually there's so many different people you're relying on to deliver that the more people you involve in the team. So whereas we had a core team and it was all sort of fantastic, it was always quite hard when we'd bring other people into that. But as Mel said, it's all about kind of having roles and responsibilities defined up front, and then trusting your partners to deliver.
All right, beautiful. So that's who worked on the project and how you formed the team, which sounded fairly organic. Sounds like you guys all knew exactly where you needed to be and what you needed to do. What did the creative process look like as you guys were developing this? Who was taking leads at different times? Where did the idea come from? Who said, I can make this happen? Were there particular hang-ups or really tough areas when involving the technology or even the ideas? Were there huge breakthroughs? Just how did that look from that 1.5 year long, which is a long process? So, how did the creative ideas come to bear fruit?
We're just talking about the very start of the process before we get into technology. I think it took quite a while actually to get to Grolsch and to get to the campaign of the Silent Legends. So I think that it's something that once we'd actually come up with it was a very simple idea, and it was actually a very easy one to then see how you could build a campaign through it, because everything kind of feeds back into that. But I think that it took quite a long time actually to get to that as a sort of platform for Grolsch. And I think that especially in marketing beer, there's a lot of very good work out there. I think that you've got to do something very good to make yourself stand out, and you've got to really sort of do something very different. So I think that it took a while to kind of actually define what the platform should be, and then where we should go from there. That was Kate and Joe, the creative team, and Jamie and McFlanner, who were kind of the main leads on that and who steered the client through a lot of different routes, a lot of different potential ways we could have taken it, and then sort of come up with something a very simple platform that we could then build from. In terms of technology, I guess Arthur, you could probably shed some light on that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the process quite clearly. It was kind of, it went the right way, I suppose. Jamie Inman, who did the planning, came up with the approach that he wanted to go with as far as, you know, the brand-to-hand experience. Kate and Joe very much looked after the creative, completely made these characters, envisaged them, and it's very easy in hindsight to kind of look back and go, oh, that's what Ewan's going to look like, or that's what Herman's going to look like. And then from there, I mean, I still remember getting the brief, which was, we've got to take a silent character and make him, you know, give beer to the people that's right, and taking it all the way from that experience from the TV ad all the way through to somebody actually getting the beer. I think the creative process when we first looked at it was quite a tricky brief. I think it's testament to the creators. They really kind of took it on board. They were hounding us every minute on exactly what we wanted bits to do and how it would all work, and that overarching creative experience that took you all the way through from one element to right to the end, even down to sort of figuring out the copy and the text and which phone you're going to use, etc., was really key to getting the whole experience right.
I think from an interaction point of view, there was a couple of things. The hang-ups, I would have said, mainly or predominantly were the fact that this had to be a really seamless video experience. And I think clients more and more are pushing for the sort of buzzword of HTML5 and what can be achieved with that. I think there was a conscious decision very early on, working with our production partner, Sting Digital, to go with a Flash-based execution. And I think that was a really important move in the end, because it actually created a really beautiful video experience. A sort of breakthrough at the same time was the actual interaction once you get the mobile voucher on your phone. I think for a while we were toying with the idea of, another production partner had let us know about having barcodes on your mobile and the ability to redeem vouchers, and it's quite a complex voucher system which Arthur could probably shed more light on than I can. But what I thought was really interesting was trying to create a level of intuitive design on top of that allows you to actually find the most local shops to you based on your location. And I think that was a really nice finishing point to what was already a really nice experience.
Right. And why did you guys... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
We could have done this stuff, you know, 5 to 10 years ago, of getting it all the way from TV to somebody actually going to a shop and redeeming it using maps, which is probably the funnest bit of the project, you know, sit all the way through.
Yeah, I think that's one of the first big mobile things that we've really seen that people have really been able to play with, is taking mobile web apps and mobile websites and really making them much more interactive because of the geolocation stuff. Being able to say, hey, your user's here, what can we tell about that, or what can we do with that piece of information? Whereas, like, you guys have gone and said, okay, great, let's find the nearest store, or let's find the nearest location where they can go do whatever. I think we're going to start to see a lot more of that stuff coming up in the future as we get access to more and more device APIs. Some of the cool ones that I think we'll start to see in the relative near future, people taking advantage of, are like device orientation and device motion. So, like, if you pretend this is my cell phone, I can pick it up and I can move it like this, and because of the accelerometer and other hardware in the machine, I can make the website or the app respond to those experiences. So as we get more and more access to hardware and the stuff like that, I think we're going to see more and more interesting and exciting apps and experiences.
Yeah, and so
I think that was a kind of another challenge with this particular campaign, because the character of Jörn is quite a simple sort of story character, whereas the technology and the back end to it is quite complex. So we didn't want to overcomplicate that character. So even say like his mobile phone that you see your text appear on, it's still a very basic mobile phone. But we had sort of the balance of making sure it was a kind of mobile phone that the character would have, but at the same time it was a big enough screen so the user could read their text on it.
Yeah, that was one thing that Kate and Joe and myself worked really hard on, was making sure that we got the experience to feel intuitive with you, not scanning a QR code or doing something that felt like it broke the overall creative experience. It needed to be something that tied in with the overall concept of these silent legends.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's also important that we're using the same concepts that our users are used to. We want to start getting them to use newer and newer things all the time, but we don't want to go, hey, here's this brand new thing that nobody's ever used before, nobody's ever touched, and we're going to ask you to go try it because everybody's going to be like, I don't know how to use this. So going with the SMS to send something, everybody knows how to send an SMS, like it's super easy. But then getting a link back, everybody again knows how to click on that link. And it really does get that, oh yeah, this is easy, I know how to use this, there's no learning curve, I can go play with this right away. There's no of that drop off that you get sometimes when people are like, oh, this was too hard.
And just to jump on that point as well, I think it's really important to know which devices you're designing for too. So I think from the get-go, we were straight away thinking about the iOS, Android, and the smartphone sort of market, and what people are used to from an interaction point of view as well, and how maps are usually displayed, and not, like you said, not straying too far away from that, and actually building upon it instead.
How did you guys decide what devices you were going to support? Was that decided by the client, or was that coming from what you guys said?
It was decided by us and our mobile production partner. We sort of scanned the market. We knew the audience relatively well and what they didn't use, and from there we worked with the client and with the production partners, and what we thought was right were the right devices to support. And I'm sure you guys know it's not always the easy journey trying to make a responsive website or a truly mobile website on these all the different elements. So it was a conscious decision to get to target ones we wanted and get them right.
And I think that also came slightly from early on in the process, because we knew that our audience very much over-indexed on kind of mobile and smartphone. So actually, any sort of experience that utilises this technology is going to do very well with that audience.
Excellent. And it sounds like you guys are very confident in your use of the technology. So, which leads me to ask, have you done work in the mobile, the geo maps kind of area before? Was this your first time out, but you just felt like you really had it down? Why did you feel so confident when you were building this out, that you were like, no, we can definitely do all this, we know for a fact it's going to run smoothly?
I think the mobile geolocation HTML5, device side of stuff, we felt relatively confident. We've done working with Cal, we've done quite a lot of responsive designs before, and thought very much from mobile upwards. Really, it's something that we've done on our own site, and also for another couple of clients that we've worked with.
Okay.
The bit that was the biggest kind of leap of faith was the API that we built for the texting setup and how that would work. We weren't too worried about the technology that you're talking about, about the APIs with the maps. It was more getting our head around this kind of custom bit of technology that we've made and exactly how that would work. You guys make it pretty easy to make the map stuff compatible and work quite well. So we weren't too worried about that part of the project.
And while we're on that note, because we want this to be an open forum where and we can all be very honest, what would you have loved to have seen from our side of things? If we could have made the Maps API or anything that you worked with on our side better, what would be that request? Just so that we have a sense and we can relay that.
I guess from an interaction design point of view, from the actual voucher, I don't think it's necessarily something that we wanted from you guys, but more, I think there's a reliance on native. So when you're using your iOS device, if you click on Google Maps, that will jump out to your native app.
Right.
I think the get direction is something that would be really nice to explore as a web app more. I think in this particular instance, it seemed more sensible to actually jump someone out to the native direction app instead. But I know that's something that is in the pipeline and something we probably do now.
No, that's great. And
cool.
I
think that's those are getting those interactions between native and mobile and mobile web are some fairly big and complex pieces, and it's certainly something that, from my view, being able to use those directions within a mobile app or mobile website I hope to see that come soon, because I think there are some really interesting spaces where you can play with that. So.
Definitely.
I did want to throw out here as well for people who are watching, if you want to ask questions of these guys, you want to ask questions of us, we just put a link up on the screen so that you can go post your questions. And towards the last 10 minutes or so of our session today, we'll take those questions and make sure that these questions get answered by some of the folks from B&B.
Absolutely. So one other question for you guys. Given that you did something that was very cool, very innovative, went across lots of different media types, involved lots of different people at your agency, I imagine you guys learned a lot of lessons that maybe aren't obvious, when you start to jump in. So my question to you then is, what do you recommend to others who are trying to innovate in a space like this, where they're using mobile, they're using maps, they're trying to connect lots of different media and lots of different ad formats together? What are the things, if you had an intern, and they had 3 questions, or they wanted 3 pieces of advice, what would you recommend if someone is trying to do something, obviously not exactly like this, but in the same kind of realm that you guys learned that maybe others don't know?
I think from a project management point of view, and the idea that there are so many different parties involved, it's just a good idea to sort of identify who the core team members are from those different parties and work out ways of having clear lines of communication so that everyone's getting the same information. So something we use quite a lot with Google Docs, because everyone could access the same information. We could do a task list, assign responsibilities, and keep everyone up to date with what was going on that particular document.
So that's just internally on this team, because it is a pretty complicated cross expertise team that you guys are working with. So just keeping those lines of communication open so everyone knows what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
Great piece of advice.
I think from a design point of view, it would be just to keep looking at things, all around you, like from the latest app to a cool website. I think it's so important to just keep up to date with what's going on in any way that you can.
Yeah, I think to me that is one of those things that as a web developer, web designer, or even a technologist in general, like staying up to date with the latest stuff is so important. Looking at some of the cool demo sites, keeping an eye on websites like HTML5 Rocks and other sites where all those new things start to bubble up and you can see what people are doing with them, is really such a great way to remain connected. It gives you that idea of, hey, what's going on in this space? I just was recently working on a Chrome experiment, and if you go to chromeexperiments.com, it's another great place. You can also go to m.chromeexperiments.com for the mobile site to see mobile Chrome experiments, and a lot of these really show off things that people either haven't done before, or a very small new feature that's just, in its infancy, and really how powerful or how cool it is. With the Cirque du Soleil Chrome experiment, we used the Get User Media API to grab the user's face and watch how their head moved throughout the experience. Works great on a laptop or desktop, but that didn't work on the mobile site. So for mobile, we used device orientation and device motion, so that as you tip the device, you can see that going. So looking at sites like that to see what's going on, what's cool, is a really good way to stay up to date, and as well as just get some ideas of stuff that you can do in the future.
I think something from my perspective would probably be, not necessarily through the technology, but actually it's having one very simple idea that you can relate everything back to. I think, us doing this mobile experience and us trying to sort of get beer into people's hands, there were a lot of points where it could have become a lot more complicated and we could have chucked different technologies in and done different things. Mm-hmm. But actually at the end of the day, it needs to be a really sort of simple user experience. It's something that kind of is very easy to do. And I think at times you can kind of overcomplicate things. And this was a good example of just keeping it simple, using technology to its best ability, and then not trying to kind of throw other bits into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And on that note, I assume that helped you sell it into the client, but I guess a kind of a follow-up question is, did you guys encounter any particularly tough areas with the client, or were they just gung-ho the whole way through? How did that work out? And if you had those experiences where they were like, I don't know if this is going to be right, how did you overcome those?
Yeah, I mean, as with every project, there are difficult moments with sort of different parties, and yeah, we did have difficult times with the client. I think, as I've said, he was involved all along, and I think that was brilliant because I think he knew what we were trying to achieve and building towards it together. I think, as we kind of touched on, the most difficult bit was not being able to kind of give them an update every few weeks.
Right.
So this is where we are, and look, you can see this is how we're progressing. It's kind of like they've got to trust that actually, we are getting on with things even if they can't see it, and actually when they use it at the end, it is going to work. And I think, one of the most scary points for me actually was 3 weeks before we were supposed to go live, and we had our first demo, and it didn't work at all. That was, it was an interesting.
We knew why.
But yeah, I think the fact that it had been a long process meant that we were all kind of on the same page, and we're all just right. Okay, it's not working now, but this is what we need to do to get it better. Give us 2 days, and then come back, and I think that we managed it, and it works out well.
Yeah, it sounds like.
Yeah. I gotta say that I would have been petrified 3 weeks before, going, oh boy. And then having the demo. So was it a simple thing that caused that first demo to fail, or was it something that you guys had missed and caused
it was the classic gotcha. It was everything that you look everywhere and you expect everything else to be causing the problem, and it was the one small thing that you didn't think. It was actually one of the APIs that the API we built used lots of other APIs, and you think that must be robust. I know that should work. We've been pinging that, and that should be working. No worries. And it was that element that was broken. For one of the APIs we used, and we just needed to look at and fix an element of it. And that we knew what the problem was. We got around it.
Cool.
Yeah, it sounds like it was an exciting moment, but one that you guys got over fairly quickly, which is that's the best ending to those kinds of excitement. So we'll go ahead and turn in just a moment to the questions that folks have been sending in. But any last pieces of advice, comments, places you would love people to go check out? Anything that you guys would like to say to the audience before we jump into their questions?
I think for me, just as while we're waiting, just the kind of really boring element, but I'm sure there's lots of devs watching. I think one thing that I learned definitely that was really, really key to making sure everything works well together is having repos, a really good system. We use a thing called Beanstalk, which allows us to deploy to all different areas and actually keep up to date with the production partners we're working on and see what's going on, and we can share rights and we can see how everything's going to work together. And it's the kind of the grind behind it, but it actually makes life really, really easy when you come to deploy and get everything sorted. People aren't, especially when we've got so many different production partners, people aren't developing their own little world and then suddenly thrown together at the last minute. We can do pre-deploys before and checking how everything's working along the way, so you don't get any big gotchas right at the end.
All right.
Cool. So if we pop over to questions, Paul B. from London wanted to know if you could improve or change anything. What would you change if you could do it again?
For me, we had this felt like the ground of a lot of bigger ideas. We had a lot of extension thoughts we were really keen to do. I think we achieved a lot in this project. I think we did really, really well. But I think if I could approach it again, there are lots of extension thoughts I definitely would have sneaked in there to try and make things work a little harder and be a little bit more groundbreaking in a few key areas.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. A bit for me is actually we'd originally thought that we were going to maybe do this in a pub. So actually the giveaway drove to people picking up cans for a shop. But there was an opportunity at one point that we might have been able to do it in a pub, and I think if we'd been able to drive people to a pub to get a pint, you could then do a lot more of those extension ideas because you've got kind of a captive audience. You know they're sitting there having their drink, and you can kind of play with that a lot more. So I think that would have been a nice extension.
Neat.
Interesting. Okay, so next question from Bob in London was, having great ideas in the lab is often easier than convincing the client to invest. How did you manage the client throughout the conception, build, and live phases of this project? And I think you guys touched on that a bit already, that you have a very deep relationship and you brought them in very early. Who was your touch point at the client? Who were you working with most closely? Did you have one contact that was like really your champion? And how did you guys manage that as this kind of went live over the course of 18 months or so?
Yeah, from the client side, we had one touch point who was our client throughout. It was Simon Pick, who's the brand manager on Grolsch, and actually he kind of, it was very much we didn't have him as our contact. He would he'd understand what we were trying to do, and then he would then go and sell it throughout the business. So we'd kind of give him the tools he needed to bring other people in and show them what was going on. And I think where we managed him sort of quite well was actually knowing when to bring other areas of the business in and when not to. I think that it's kind of, there are times where you can actually bring people in unnecessarily and you can panic them if you might not be in a position, or you might not have everything that you need to kind of convince people that you're going in the right direction. And I think that one thing was really important was actually managing the timing of this process and when we bring key stakeholders in. So I think it was working closely with him to then work with the rest of Molson Coors and the rest of Grolsch.
So knowing when to bring in the right people and when to, let's say, focus on the smaller number of people that maybe get it a little more, and knowing when to open that door and close that door at appropriate times. That sounds like it was a key skill in this case. Great. Can you share some of the engagement results? Came from Romain Pierre. If I'm mispronouncing your name, I apologize. So what were the engagement results like? Or can you share those?
Yeah, no, we absolutely can. I think that it was actually very impressive with the engagement. It was a lot more than we'd kind of hoped for. Well, not as much as we'd hoped for, but a lot more than we'd kind of expected, actually. We had, in terms of the total unique visits, we had 139,988, which actually...
Not to be specific.
Not that you memorized that or anything.
Yeah. You know, over a 3-month period, that was very good. And actually, the Grolsch website itself went from quite low down in the kind of teens in terms of beer websites, jumped up to number 2.
Wow!
Which actually, just in this campaign, which for us was great.
That's amazing.
And it then got a lot of data, a lot of phone numbers, a lot of people signing up to the website, and a lot of things like that. So, kind of the engagement around it actually was really fantastic.
All right. Great.
I think another kind of just thing on that, Max, was that we managed to get really good dwell time. I think the dwell time started around 4 minutes and ended up somewhere as an average of about 3. Was a dwell time really high, but we've managed to accumulate a database of hopefully really intrigued consumers that are interested in taking it to the next level. We've got a few ideas of where we'll go with that, but the actual we set out. The plan was to get a core audience that would keep really engaged with the brand, and hopefully the stats show that we managed to achieve that.
Awesome, cool. So question, this sounds like you guys wanted to do this, and maybe that'll be a follow-up question from Ben Jones. Do you have a plan for deeper interaction beyond the initial chance to win beer, to go, buy the cans? And it sounds like you guys wanted to do that. Do you have plans with the client to actually take this to a deeper level, or is that something you guys can develop?
We're in plans at the moment. Obviously, they're very hush-hush.
Okay, so no details, but but it was.
We've got a decent base, and as Arthur said, we've got kind of a lot of engaged, intrigued people. I think that it's absolutely something that we want to build on and move on.
Cool. So from Peter Thistle in Vancouver, has the client shared any analytic methodology or data with you, reporting from mobile app? How many samples? We kind of touched on this in the previous question, but I'm kind of curious. I'm going to take it a little bit in a different way. What was the mobile engagement like, specifically for the mobile pieces?
I mean, like Max said, Grolsch had been not necessarily dormant, but not as strong as it could be for a while. There was some key focus groups that figured out the different statistics of devices that we needed to approach. We didn't have a big website that had been running on mobile for a long time to figure out exactly what we wanted to target.
Okay.
But I think we all kind of get a pretty good idea of the key browsers and platforms that you should target, and we back that up with some knowledge as well of searching, right audiences before we went ahead.
Cool.
All right. So the next question was, and we can pause on this one because it sounds like this is what's in the works for you guys. That is not public yet, but the question was, how did you think about activating it in bars around the world? Since you mentioned, oh, we would have loved to have had people in the pub. That would have been our ideal. Can you talk about what you would have done there, or is that something that's for phase 2 that we'll talk to you guys in a few months about?
We can talk about it. Yeah, we worked with a really great production partner called Mobius. They had some technology up their sleeve with the stuff they'd done before with Blue Moon, and how they were going to, basically they'd made this system that would allow you to redeem a pint in a bar and then track it exactly. Some of the extension thoughts I'm sure people can imagine was it allowed real-time stats and actually allowed real-time location, even more finite than you'd probably get with a GPS device, which is quite interesting.
Wow. Okay.
So some of those thoughts came from there, and that was why one of the reasons we were so keen, was we felt like we could do some interesting stuff with that.
Great.
So I think our next question we've kind of already covered on who came up with the idea. So we'll go to the next question. Are there further adventures planned for Journt, remarketing to people in some clever way or anything like that? That may have been covered in what you just...
I mean, it sounds like the answer is yes,
yeah.
But just to confirm, he will be loose on the world for months to come.
Yeah, I think he's a great character, so it'd be a shame to not let him loose on the world again at some point or another.
Excellent.
Cool.
And we have one final...
I think the really fun, just to sort of inject, I think the really fun part about it is actually that it started above the line, but I think we will continue with Journt on platforms that aren't traditional above the line media, which is what's quite exciting, I think, about the campaign. Let's say 2013, I think we'll continue on a certain tangent that we see it going at the moment.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's all blending together very seamlessly in this very kind of elegant way across all these media types, which everyone says that they want to do, of course, but it is a real struggle often for a lot of reasons within agencies and with clients to actually do that. And it sounds like you guys have really hit across that kind of seamless connection across, from television to digital and everywhere else. So super cool. The last question, and it's appropriate. It's a little bit of a biting question, and we're all going to be very open and honest here. I'm just going to ask it straight out from Jim in Lake Tahoe, and I'll see what you guys say. Which is, looks like your audience was young single males, perhaps white males. Hopefully, there's more to it than that. So I will let you respond to Jim. What was your demo? How do you guys want to expand? What are the demos that you'd love to reach? If you could just talk, because that's something actually we haven't talked about yet today. Who was the audience specifically? How did you determine that, and what would be your ideal audience?
Well, I think the audience for Grolsch is slightly older. It's kind of it's a 25 to 40 really, and it's I think it's an audience that more kind of once you've sort of had your wild drinking days, they're more behind you, and you prefer a quiet, more kind of premium pint, let's say. And so that, as I'd sort of said, they kind of over-index against mobile, and I think that they're a very interesting audience, and they're a very kind of untapped audience, I think, from a beer perspective. So I think they're very much this sort of audience we'd like to keep on going with, but. I don't know, Arthur or Mel and Cal, if you've got any other audiences you'd like to talk to.
All right, Jim, in Lake Tahoe, if you have other audiences, just let them know. They're happy to reach out to broader audiences. And I lied, actually. Did you want to
yeah.
There is one more question that just popped in.
Yep, so we just had one more question pop in from Liana. But asking, how difficult do you think it will be to keep selling these kinds of ideas to your client?
To sell this idea, I think it'd be very difficult to sell this idea again. But I think what's quite nice about what we created is this kind of this experience that requires new technology. So it's a very simple idea, and I think that won't change. It's in the simplicity of it. I think we all really appreciate how important that is. But as Arthur mentioned before, I think there's some really interesting tangents we can take this on. And also some new technologies we can use as well.
I think it's also really. Oh, sorry, Mark.
I was just going to say, I think also when you've got kind of the stats and the figures, the results of the campaign, it always makes it easier then for the client to trust you to deliver a similar kind of campaign and another kind of new technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that being able to say, hey, look, we had 130. I don't remember the exact number, but
a lot.
That large number, and say, look, this is what we did. It becomes easier to sell new ideas when you can say, here's some data on something new we did.
Yeah, but it's key to be able to have those clients that, first of all, to be at the agency able to explain it in a clear way and have those clients that said, yes, let's make it a little bit of a leap, small leap, we're not going crazy, and see what happens. So it sounds like you guys had a great situation both on your side and on their side.
I think to Max's point, I think the Max made earlier on is if the overarching creative is right, if it's right for what they're trying to achieve, if it's right for the different mediums, then it's not such a big sell. It's not trying to go ahead with, look, we've got this interesting technology that's going to change things. I think if the creative idea works strong enough, then it kind of could hopefully, with a bit of backup and prototypes we were talking earlier on, sort of sell itself.
And the brief wasn't it wasn't a sort of complicated one. It wasn't a different one. It was get Grolsch in the hands of people. And actually, if you can find a technology that makes that happen in a better way than has been done before, then I think absolutely ideas like this will still sort of fly out. But I think it's just having the right technology for the right kind of means.
Absolutely. All right, well, that about wraps it for the questions we had for you guys and the audience questions, which were very interesting. Thanks, folks who are watching this, for sending in those questions. Any last comments or topics that you guys want to talk about, or any last things you'd like folks to go take a look at? Now's your chance. Give us a pitch.
Go to the BMB website.
What is the URL for the website?
bmbagency.com.
All right, bmbagency.com. All right,
that's the one.
So you can check out more of their work. Thank you guys so much. I know it's like 8 o'clock in London, so I hope you enjoy a fine Grolsch right after this call is done. I wish I were right now.
Yes. Sorry, last thing. Just you can use this opportunity to say something. If anybody does want to get into advertising in London, there's a really cool thing opening the next couple of weeks called adscheme.bmbagency.com. Go and check it out. It's hopefully a fun way of getting involved with advertising.
Cool. All right, very cool. And for those of you, if you happen to come in halfway through this is all recorded, and so all the questions and answers will be available in the next couple of days. And for those of you that want to follow along the entire week, tomorrow, same time at 2:30 Eastern, we're going to be talking about the YouTube API and some uses there. So, guys, thank you so much, BMB Agency. It was fantastic to talk to you. And if we get further questions, we will send them your way. And thank you so much again, and have a wonderful evening. And thanks to everyone who joined the Hangout. Hopefully, we'll see you all tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.